Okay, next we are going to turn to testimony for H.2000 and S.1236, an act relative to benzodiazepines and non-benzodiazepine hypnotics. The first person we have signed up to testify is Geraldine Burns. Are you with us, Geraldine?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right. Good afternoon, chairs and members of the committee, and thank you for letting me share my testimony. I also want to thank Representative McMurtry for his continued support and care for this cause. We are here today to talk about benzodiazepines such as Valium, Xanax, Ativan, Klonopin, and the sleeping aids like Ambien and Lunesta. Typically, these drugs are known as minor tranquilizers, but there is nothing minor about them. These drugs can cause dependence and injure the central nervous system, creating a horrific withdrawal. I am not against this class of medication by any means. They have their purpose, but they were only intended for short term, no longer than 2 to 4 weeks. None of us here took more than we were told, and none of us abused them. We were told these drugs were safe, harmless, and non-addictive, but that's not true. In the 25 years that I've been bringing awareness to this class of medication, not one person I've ever talked to was given informed consent. When these drugs start to cause interdose withdrawal or a person reaches tolerance on them, it is easy to say they have a mental illness than to deal with helping them withdraw, which can be very painful, or they're prescribed even more medication. Something has to change. In Dr. Charles Whitfield's book, Not Crazy, You May Not Be Mentally Ill, he states, benzodiazepines have one of the most debilitating withdrawal reactions in all of medicine. Dr. Alan Francis, who was the chair of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 4 Task Force, states, no one should accept a psychiatric medication without being informed, without a thorough evaluation, without consideration not just of the benefits, but also the risks. Since we started testifying back in 2015 for this cause, more documentaries have been made, of which one, as prescribed, was filmed here in the State House. More books have been written, more organizations have formed, more podcasts are being recorded, more Facebook groups have formed, there are more benzo YouTube channels, and more benzo coaches are taking clients. But worst of all, more people have committed suicide from the long-term suffering, and more people are joining these groups looking for help, and no help from the medical community. Yet as word is getting out about the dangers of prescribing more than 2 to 4 weeks because of the black box warning, instead of helping patients slowly taper, they are being cut off cold turkey, which is a disgrace. When I spoke at Governor Baker's opioid hearing a few years ago, there is all this help for people harmed by opioids. The benzo crisis is even bigger, that there is no help for these good patients. There is nothing but denial. There is even an issue. If any of you sitting here today were prescribed this class of medication, whether it be for a migraine, minor stress, after a death, a reaction from another medication, etc., would you take it? Would you take it knowing it could cause you to have anxiety, panic attacks, or agoraphobia? Or even using it short term, you could end up going through a horrific withdrawal that could last months to years, or it could cause menstrual irregularities, dementia, or fibromyalgia type pain. We were the first state to introduce this type of bill, and other states have already adopted changes. We can do better in this state. If you believe that even one person here who is testifying is credible, then this bill is worth passing for informed consent and a commission to study it further.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for, please?
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I don't know if the witness can hear me. I don't have a microphone, but.
Ms. Burns, can you hear?
Yes, I can.
Okay, fine. Oh, thank you, my good colleague. You listed a number of medications that fall into the class that this bill would cover. Was that
Yes.
an exhaustive list? How many are there?
There are numerous names for the benzodiazepines. You know, their genetics and the brand. So there are numerous lists. And many people that are put on them don't even know what type of drug they're put on half the time. They just take it. And then when they start to develop problems, they don't realize it's from the medication. As with most of us as we develop problems. I was given it after the birth of my child because I didn't know I had an infection, but because I was a woman that had a baby, I was just handed Ativan.
One more, if I could, Mr. Chairman. Does the bill, I'm quickly scanning it, does it involve the pharmacist at some point?
We had it in there at one point. It does not at this point. We were hoping for, informed consent, short-term reason, short-term prescription, symptom-guided tapers, because that is the biggest mistake happening right now. So many being yanked off very fast. And then anyone who's been on them long-term, they cannot just be cut off. You know, they need to be educated and then, you know, help them to taper if they choose to. But some have been on 30, 40 years.
All right, thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions? Senator Beals.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Ms. Burns, just very briefly, I just want to thank you for highlighting this issue. You know, we spend a lot of time, particularly in this committee, talking about opiates, fentanyls, and really kind of even stimulants right now, and all deservedly so. Benzos, in my opinion, kind of fall below the radar in so many different respects. And in a day and age when so many of our overdoses are polysubstance overdoses, with benzos being in many of them, I agree with you. This is I just want to thank you for highlighting it. I think spending more time talking about the benzo crisis that most certainly is out there is a really big deal. So thank you.
And if I can just say something to you, because when I spoke at the opioid meeting, my own niece was just 30 years old when she died. She went in just to come off of alcohol because she was going through a divorce. And she comes out on Xanax, gets in a car accident, given an opioid, which suppressed her breathing, and she died, leaving 3 little girls behind. And also our military was being given benzodiazepines. Some of them are just taken off, then they're put on more drugs. Our military are being so mistreated, with people not understanding what we go through to get off of these drugs. And we're all good patients, you know? It needs to be seriously looked at.
Sorry for your personal loss, ma'am, and thank you for sharing today.
Please.
Can you guys hear me? I wanted to thank you for your work. Many of you know that I lost my son, my only child, to an opioid overdose. But benzos were a big part of his journey. When he was on benzos, because of risky behavior, he had a major back injury, which put him on the eventual journey that led to his death. And I don't know how much this bill would or would not have made a difference, but I've personally seen the adverse impact of benzodiazepine on so many people. Thank you for your work.
Any other questions or comments from committee members? Anything on that? Okay.
If I could say one more thing, when I spoke at the opioid meeting, I believe it's 60% of the opioid deaths involved a benzodiazepine. It's the combination that was killing them.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Burns.
Of course, good afternoon, chairs and members of the Joint Committee, and thank you, of course, for holding this hearing today. I speak as a survivor of bind, benzodiazepine-induced neurological dysfunction, and as a documentary filmmaker who has researched benzodiazepine benefits and harms over the last decade. Before I learned firsthand how dangerous my prescribed Klonopin was, I would have insisted that I was taking a safe drug and was experiencing only benefits. After all, Klonopin was helping my worsening anxiety and seemed to be the only thing that could help me sleep. I hadn't been like that before. This developed while I was taking the drug. It was prescribed. It was only during a period of what seemed to be good health in 2012 that I decided to stop taking the drug. I had a rude awakening. I discovered on Wikipedia that it was extremely dangerous to stop Klonopin or any benzodiazepine abruptly. I was fortunate enough to find a support website based in the UK that offered the manual written by the late Dr. Heather Ashton of Newcastle University. She had set up a clinic to help patients taper safely off of the benzodiazepine medications that were destroying them. She had become involved in benzodiazepine research after listening to her patients. The Ashton Manual saved my life, and also mentioned that the inspiration for the Ashton Manual, Geraldine Burns, just testified. My doctor agreed to support a taper. She had no idea that benzos were harming any of her patients. She agreed that the Ashton Manual was eye-opening and said she was going to recommend it to at least one other patient who was taking a benzo. This doctor was rare. She believed me. We need more doctors who listen to their patients and are willing to educate themselves about the expanding research. I have heard doctors speak before committees here, insisting that benzodiazepines are safe and harmless. I have heard a doctor who opposed the bill state that the bill might cause patients to be cut off a medication they need. But it is the same doctor's colleagues who are cutting patients off abruptly and at increasingly alarming rates. Too many people are being cut off benzodiazepines now. Those patients, all patients, need to be protected. Abrupt cessation can lead to extreme disability and long-term central nervous system damage. If the doctors cannot regulate themselves, if they are not following the latest science, if they are not listening to the patients who have been harmed, then they do need to be regulated. Doctors all across Massachusetts are harming people with these prescriptions with substandard treatment and by withholding prescriptions once they have actually created iatrogenic dependency in patients. Benzos can be so helpful short term, but so many of those who have the right to prescribe are ignoring the facts of benzodiazepine harm, holding on to a prescribing protocol that was created to sell drugs, not to protect people. Please support this life-saving bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hardman. Do we have any questions from the committee? Okay, thank you for your testimony.
You're welcome.
Back to testimony on H.2000 S.1236. Next up, we have Lisa Jean Nash.
Hi, thank you in advance for listening to my story. I'm a lifelong Massachusetts resident. I was a software startup consultant for 35 years. And I've not been able to work in almost 7 years, and I'm on Social Security disability. I'd like to share my experience about the consequences of taking a benzodiazepine as prescribed. I was prescribed Xanax for medical procedures that I had had done 22 times due to being in 3 car accidents. I had a neck injury, I had whiplash. I was never, like thousands of others, prescribed Xanax for an anxiety disorder, but as a muscle relaxant, and for those purposes only. I began to have symptoms that my doctor thought were coming from my neck injury. But after he researched more, he realized that all of my symptoms were exactly the same as the side effects of Xanax. The list of my symptoms is very long, so to save time, I won't speak to them here, but will include them in my written testimony. The question became, was it my neck injuries or the side effects from Xanax that were causing my severely disabling symptoms? The only way to find out was to taper off the Xanax and see what happened. I asked my primary care doctor, who had prescribed the drug to me for years at this point, to do a safe, slow taper. His response was that he had no idea how. He had never tapered anyone before. Instead of learning, he demanded I do an extremely rapid taper that made me bedridden and totally disabled. Shortly thereafter, he wrote me a letter and told his nurse to call me to inform me that he would no longer prescribe Xanax, nor would he support my slow taper, which left me stranded, risking seizure and death from a cold turkey withdrawal, which sent me to the emergency room. The emergency room doctor told me that I would need to return every 3 days to avoid seizing from the withdrawal, and that this was a very dangerous situation I was in. Who would help me? At that point, I and my insurance company searched and searched. We spent hours on the phone calling doctor after doctor to take on my case without any success, until I called Dr. Edward Silberman, the chief of psychiatry at Tufts. He had testified against the bill several years prior. I called him and he agreed to see me immediately. When he looked at my CVS prescription history, he became very upset and said that my taper was extremely unsafe. And he said that my PCP would have killed me if it had continued. He told me to immediately stop the taper. I was 95 pounds and completely bedridden. I felt and looked like I was dead. He apologized to me for all of the unnecessary suffering I endured due to my PCP's lack of knowledge, and he assured me that he would support me in a safe, slow taper guided by my body. He nor I was not going to determine the rate at which I tapered. My symptoms would.
Ms. Nash, I'm
Doctor-
sorry, if you could just wrap up the testimony, we are beyond the 3 minutes at this point.
If we could educate everyone so what has happened to me won't happen to anyone else, and use Dr. Silverman as an example and educate everyone about how to do this and how to do this safely. Please pass this bill in the future to prevent further harm. Let's be the leaders John F. Kennedy wanted us to be. If not now, then when?
Thank you so much for your testimony, and please feel free to send us longer commentary via written testimony, okay? Do we have any questions or comments from the committee? Thank you for your time, Ms. Nash. We'll hear from Ms. Omartian, is that?
Yeah, you pronounced it
Okay.
perfectly. Perfectly.
And then we'll circle back to you, Doctor. Please take it away.
Great. Again, my name is Lauren Omartian. My last name is spelled O-M-A-R-T-I-A-N, and I'm a lifelong resident of Massachusetts, currently live in Watertown. I've actually presented testimony in support of the Mass Benzo bill back in 2016, 2017, 2019, 2021, and I'm here again the 5th time to present testimony in favor of this crucial bill. My experience taking benzodiazepines exactly as prescribed was catastrophic. I live with a permanent iatrogenic injury. You can hear or actually read more details of my story online if you care to. Just search Lauren Omartian for the record. Lauren Omartian for the record. The finely crafted benzo bill would mandate informed consent. Bay State residents would learn of the potential risks of these pharmaceuticals before taking them. I was listening to someone who was giving testimony today in favor of another bill with the hopes of dialing back on suicide in Massachusetts. And one thing that I hope and I trust that this committee understands is that some psychotropics, specifically benzodiazepines, in my case Xanax, actually for many people cause suicidal ideation. So when we're looking at how do we fit this into the big mental health picture, please know that some medications, including what people are talking about today, benzodiazepines, can actually increase your risk for suicide. And I just want to say in closing, please support this life-affirming bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have members, questions from members of the committee? Thank you so much for your time. Yeah, Dr. Bohan, let's try to see if we can make this work.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm Mike Bohan. I'm a physician. I'm an addiction medicine specialist. I'm a retired Navy, and I worked in addiction treatment starting at Chelsea Naval Hospital. Now you probably don't remember that because it closed in 1974. But and I moved there to Bethesda Naval Hospital, then on to Portsmouth, Virginia, where I started working in benzodiazepine detox rehab. Your attention to this matter is very good. I mean, I'm so happy to see that we have a legislator like yours that's bringing this to our attention, and it's a problem that needs help. I had a problem. I mean, not myself personally, but I had a problem with my family too. My father was dependent upon benzodiazepines. He ended up dying of seizures relating to them at age 81. He was a doctor. He prescribed benzodiazepines to my Uncle Johnny, a World War II PTSD person, and those pills I think contributed to his suicide. His sister, my Aunt Kathleen, became addicted to these pills too, and she fell and injured herself badly when she was in her late 70s. So I see this problem in the family, and also I've seen it, and I've worked with hundreds of patients using the Heather Ashton model to work on tapering them off of these drugs. I greatly encourage you to vote for this and promote this idea of informed consent. You'd be one of the leaders in the nation in doing this. You already heard testimony from people who've been personally afflicted by these drugs. I've heard hundreds, maybe thousands of them, and nothing much is being done. Prescribers are prescribing enough drugs for these patients to take forever. That's not something I think we can really deal with. I think we have to work like what you're doing, which is starting informed consent, allowing patients to be informed of the black box warnings, which are on all benzodiazepine prescription. The first one, the black box warnings, has to do with combining with opiates. We heard that already, a personal story of a person, the legislator's son, who had the combination of benzos and opiates probably led to his death. Also, another is the tolerance and dependence. We heard that too, from about this called BIND, which is a benzodiazepine injury neurological disorder, which is something which describes some of the serious problems that benzo patients have. And the last, of course, is dependence. These drugs shouldn't be prescribed more than 1 month without risk of tolerance and dependence. So I hope you all will jump on board on signing up on the bill on informed consent for benzodiazepines. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions or comments from committee members? Nothing online? Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Robert Maloney.
Okay.
Hello.
Hey, how are you? I would like to thank the chairs and members of the committee, especially Representative McMurtry, for giving me the chance to speak today. My name is Robert Maloney, and I'm a retired police officer and a lifelong Mass resident. I was injured on the job, and I had many surgeries. Pain pills became a way of daily life. My injuries forced me to retire earlier than I would have liked. My life on pain pills was difficult, and after years on them, eventually I took myself off at home with no help. I suffered for several weeks, but then it was over. I went to the gym, hired a trainer, went on a very healthy diet. The residual problem that I had was severe insomnia. I fought it for years and didn't want to take anything for sleep, but eventually my doctor prescribed Ambien with no informed consent, no warning of how difficult it would be to get off. As a result of taking the Ambien, I started to lead a sedentary lifestyle and had a poor diet. I gained a lot of weight. But today I'm back to exercising and a healthy diet, but it's almost impossible to get off the Ambien. Yes, getting off opioids was extremely difficult, but this class of medication is a whole other animal. I have started a slow process of weaning off the Ambien, but I understand that even with this slow taper process, I could not only have withdrawal symptoms, but a long drawn out withdrawal. In my case, no alternative was offered to help me sleep. No informed consent, no explanation that I would have not only have terrible withdrawal symptoms, but my sleep would become impossible without taking Ambien. Please be aware of the unnecessary suffering that could be avoided had people just been informed prior to being given the prescription. I ask that you please pass this bill and save others from this suffering. Thank you for listening to me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maloney. Do we have comments or questions from committee members? Okay, thank you for your time. Next, we'll hear from a panel from the Benzodiazepine Information Coalition consisting of Brian Beltz and Dan Fisher. Are you with us, gentlemen?
Hello, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
I'm here. We can hear you.
Okay, I apologize. I'm doing this from my car. I'm having to work lots of overtime since I've been out of commission for 2 years due to a benzodiazepine protracted withdrawal. So I'll start from the beginning. When in about 2015, I quit opiates. and went through what I thought was going to be the worst withdrawal of my entire life. I stayed clean for 8 years and was considered a success story by many people that knew me. Little did I know I was going to get prescribed Ambien during the pandemic because I was working remote and I was unable to sleep. And I mean, that withdrawal just made opiate addiction seem like a joke in retrospect. I spent the following 2 years researching ways to take my own life. There was nobody on the suicide hotline that could help me. I had akathisia. It's one of the worst symptoms you can ever imagine. My family members at one point were actually okay with me going to Switzerland to seek an assisted suicide because my symptoms were so bad. I lost a business that I was starting and a job through all of this. So I fully understand the issues with opiates and that it is also a crisis, but this is a crisis that you may not always see because the deaths are not marked as benzo deaths, where every opiate death says it's an opiate death. People commit suicide from these drugs, and no one knows that it was actually caused by the benzodiazepine. So I would very much hope that anyone that's taking these drugs knows that they're potentially going to undergo years, if not permanent, torture. And I told my mom and everyone I knew that I wish I had gone back on opiates or that I had died from it. Luckily, I've reached a point that that's no longer my plans, but some people are still suffering 10 years out. So I really hope that you guys will take this bill seriously. Thank you so much for letting me testify.
Thank you, Brian. Is Dan Fisher testifying with you? Or is Dan Fisher here?
Yeah, I'm right here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before your committee on this very important matter. I'm a psychiatrist, and I have dealt with a fair number of patients who have been in withdrawal, and many of their doctors, medical or psychiatrists, did not really believe that they had withdrawal symptoms. But over time, I'm certainly very convinced that these withdrawal symptoms can go on for actually sometimes years. And the symptoms have been listed here by some of your people testifying in terms of insomnia, in terms of anxiety itself, sometimes hallucinations. These are very strong drugs. And in addition, I think the informed consent should definitely include alternatives to benzodiazepines. They're given out so quickly for people having anxiety, whereas there are a number of other ways to reduce anxiety. And so a real genuine informed consent should include alternatives. These might be around diet and exercise, meditation. There are a number of ways other than a medication, and we need public education about this. I think the other part that's been brought up here is the length of the science of prescribing benzodiazepine. I don't think psychiatrists are adequately educated, and although it's a bit beyond the scope of this legislation, it's something to be considered is the education of psychiatrists and of medical doctors of the dangers, the risks involved for abuse, the risks involved for very severe symptoms when people are coming off the medications, and the combination of them with alcohol and opioids, which has been brought up today, is a deadly combination. These drugs are more dangerous in some instances than alcohol and opioids because people don't realize how dangerous they are. I think in terms of public education, it's very important. I have had clients who insisted that they had to have the benzodiazepine. And with it, especially a history of addiction, alcohol, or other drugs, I've told them, no, this is too dangerous to have. And I actually had one client bring me before the Board of Medicine for not prescribing a benzodiazepine. If it was more widely known, if it were more publicly educated, we wouldn't have this kind of demand that is out there for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from committee members? Okay. I want to thank, just quickly pause and just say thank you, particularly to those with lived experience who have been testifying and to those that we're going to hear later. It is incredibly hard for you all to come and to share such personal stories, but it really is important that we hear from you. So I just want to say thank you for that. Okay, how about Jennifer Niles? Hi, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman, and the committee, and my representative, Michael Kushmarek, for being here today. My name is Jennifer Niles. I am a lifelong resident of Massachusetts, and I currently reside in Lunenburg on the line of Fitchburg. I testified in support of informed consent legislation in 2019 as well as 2021, and I am just here to strongly express the urgency of this bill, and I stand behind everybody who has shared their stories today. I have my own personal experience with a long-term clonazepam prescription, and if this bill had been law in March of 2002, I never would have been prescribed clonazepam or taken it if I had been. It could have protected me, and it can protect so many other people. Currently, I have someone very special in my life who's on a long-term clonazepam prescription, and she's here with me today. So this bill will also protect patients like her who still need to come off and have concerns about the future and about being abruptly stopped or not being able to get through. I don't really want to say anymore. I will share written testimony again, but we do need this passed, and I know you're taking this seriously. I can see it, and thank you for being here today to listen to all of us.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions or comments? Representative Kushmarek.
Thank you, Chairman Modero, and not a question, but just simply a comment. Jen, you and I have sat. We've shared some long conversations about your stories and your journey and your struggles along that journey, and I just want to praise you for your work and your perseverance, not just in life but along this legislative journey as well. In sharing your stories and those who preceded you this afternoon, and Geraldine and Lisa, Robert, Brian, who I'm not afraid to admit, I had my box of tissues right next to me, and I had to turn my camera off. Heartbreaking to hear that each of you and so many others have continued your struggles. And only through those struggles and your willingness to share those stories with us and with the public and with the medical community can we then address it and find long-term remedies and solutions. So Jen, thank you for everything you keep doing, and to everybody else who has testified today, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Couldn't agree more.
Thank you so much, Mike. And I do want to add that it is very helpful to have the slow tapers. I mean, I was successful. I celebrate 7 years free next month, and I'd really like that for more people. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. We'll circle back to the panel from the Benzodiazepine Information Coalition with Sonja Styblo and Nicole Lamberson. Apologies if I mispronounced the name.
It's okay. Sonja here. You always get it right, surprisingly. All right. Going to talk really quick. I'm a licensed social worker, board member of a related nonprofit. I've lived in Massachusetts for 35 years. Senator Brownsberger and Senate sponsor of this bill was my senator. People here, myself included, are consumer victims who have suffered tremendous damage to their central nervous systems and lives from long-term prescribing. This has practically nothing to do with addiction, which was a blaming tactic used in past opposition. Most long-term patients experience some or all of the following: loss of efficacy with new problems appearing while on the drugs, grueling tapers, sometimes years, or hellish lengthy effects after they've come off, and so-called syndromes like I experienced. I suffered hundreds of symptoms for years after discontinuing Klonopin, which I took as prescribed, that made death seem welcome. And rounding up support for today, 4 people on my personal list did end up suiciding to no longer endure the medical damage they were experiencing. 11 years off, and I still suffer significant cognitive nerve and sleep problems. These issues are caused by central nervous system adaptations that medical authorities have historically not understood or denied. That's slowly changing. Yes, this is unbelievable. Nevertheless, take into consideration the following. In 1979, Senator Kennedy of Massachusetts created a federal committee on benzos, and their final recommendation was to label for short-term use. That never happened. Some drug makers have had small print warnings in their leaflets for years stating that their drugs should not be taken for over 2 to 4 weeks. That did not translate to practice. In response to Consumer Reports, 3 years ago, the FDA issued a black box warning which mentions withdrawal reactions, stating that they can last 18 months after people come off. We know it can be much longer. 5 years ago, a piece published in a respected psychiatric journal discussed how peer websites created by victims received 250,000 views a month. Individual testimony from the last hearing before this committee has over 10,000 views on YouTube. The patient portion alone, not including experts. You can see that right there. That's you, Chairman Madero, on YouTube with 10,000 views at the past hearing. The informed consent we're seeking is not that much of an ask or difficult to implement. Warn people about likely and torturous effects caused by a product they are given. I would say a no-brainer, but that hits a little too close to home. Corporate America and medical bodies have created this massive consumer rights scandal, and they've clearly shown an inability to self-correct or self-regulate. Therefore, we have lived experience. Therefore, those of us with lived experience are asking elected officials to intervene immediately. I'll wrap up real quick. This bill was first filed in 2016. The longer this committee waits, the more people will needlessly suffer and die. 2 years ago, Colorado quickly passed legislation preventing new long-term prescriptions with rare exceptions. Previous organizational sponsors include MORE, Mental Health Legal Advisors Committee, the National Association of Social Workers. The research and real-world evidence is clear. Most people get worse from consistent long-term prescribing across all domains and face serious risks. People need to be adequately informed. And I'm going to send all members research that backs this up and all the history of this problem that should have been rectified many, many years ago. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Do we have any questions or comments? On H.2000, or excuse me, H.2000 S.1237, Nicole Lamberson. Nicole Lamberson. I think we see you online. Oh, hi.
Yeah. Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Okay, great. So my name is Nicole Lamberson. I am a physician assistant, and I've testified every year this bill has come up, and I'm here again this year in support. I serve on the medical advisory board of Benzodiazepine Information Coalition, and I've helped countless hundreds of people injured by benzodiazepines and withdrawing from them over the years. In 2005, at the age of 25, I was prescribed benzos for mild work-related stress. I took them as prescribed. I have no history of mental illness or addiction. I started developing terrible adverse effects to the drugs, but no doctors recognized them. And so I became a victim of polypharmacy, more medications to treat the adverse effects of the benzodiazepines. I saw countless specialists, And myself, ultimately, and my anesthesiologist dad are the ones who finally figured out that benzodiazepines were responsible for my decline. Next, I made a horrible decision. I went to a detox center that ripped me off of the medications quickly. I was treated like an addict there, even though I'd only ever taken the drugs as prescribed. Once I left the detox center, I was severely ill. No medical providers believed me, aside from my dad, or knew how to help. And I'm a medical provider myself, so I had that privilege when trying to seek medical care. So I can only imagine what lay people are experiencing out there when presenting with this benzodiazepine harm. I was also never taught about this in my PA school training. At Benzodiazepine Information Coalition, which is a nonprofit that educates about benzodiazepines, we receive emails constantly from medical providers, many of whom are similarly injured and are too scared to speak out. Some doctors, PAs, nurse practitioners write us asking how to help their patients because they don't know how. What ensued after my rapid withdrawal, there are no words. Hundreds of relentless and intolerable, inhumane symptoms that persisted day after day. I lost my career, my health, my social life, my ability to function. I was completely disabled and barely left my home for years. I lost my ability to be a mother, as this happened during my childbearing years. The financial implications to me, my family, the community from these drugs are huge. My withdrawal was in 2010. It's 2023, and I still endure chronic debilitating symptoms. That's 13 years of disability from these medications. I know others before me have told you there's a black box warning on these drugs. The FDA has put up $2 million in grant money to a prominent medical society in the United States to come up with deprescribing guidelines. I'm on that patient committee, so hopefully that will help with getting people off of the drugs. But this bill is important to warn people ahead of being prescribed them that they pose significant risk. Please support informed consent for these medications in Massachusetts by supporting this bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions or comments from committee members? Okay, thank you for your time. Bernard Silvernail?
Yes, I'm here.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for coming back so that I could testify here. I'm testifying in support of informing patients of the injury risks of benzodiazepines prior to the prescription. That's the bills H.2000 and S.1236. I'm here to talk about two things. First, my spouse was injured by benzodiazepines, and second, I am the CEO of a nonprofit dedicated to reducing benzodiazepine harm. So I'd like to talk about both of these things. First of all, Carrie's story. My wife was a practicing RN. She had used a single Xanax prescription for anxiety and used it as needed over 2 months. It was a PRN prescription. It wound up inducing a bunch of other neurological symptoms for which she was prescribed Valium. She used that for 3 months. Both of these are benzodiazepines. Eventually, through online searches, she discovered that that most of the problems she was experiencing were associated with long-term use of benzodiazepines. It took her 3.5 horrible years to taper off of this. She had to quit her job, dramatically reduce her social contact, and a lot of other ramifications. But she's now 9 years benzo-free, so you would think that everything's good. But she still suffers over 30 neurological symptoms that were not present before initiating benzodiazepines. I also represent the Alliance for Benzodiazepine Best Practices. This is a group of 20 medical professionals and a dozen or so other professionals, a bunch of whom have been injured by benzodiazepines, but I would say less than half. And we have received many requests for help from Massachusetts residents. Our organization published the most complete medical text in 13 medical journal papers on benzodiazepines. We've educated over 10,000 prescribers and pharmacists on evidence-based use of benzodiazepines, and we developed and delivered CME courses. And we're in the process of performing a research project with the FDA and Kaiser Permanente on this topic. So we simply believe patients have a right to know what the evidence shows. That they can suffer withdrawal in 2 to 4 weeks, can be severe and long-lasting, and this is documented by hundreds of papers. Patients can be injured by these medications. Neurological dysfunction can last for years. This is documented by a few papers plus thousands of patient testimonials and at least a part of the over 300,000 FAERS complaints to the FDA. The best evidence indicates that 20 to 40% of users beyond 4 weeks are injured. We think patients need to know this before being prescribed benzodiazepines.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions or comments from the committee? Okay, thank you so much for your time.